All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to get us kicked off here. I'm going to drop the link to my slides in your cohort channel. And that is going to have a activity that we're going to work on this morning. All right, so I just dropped that into your cohort channel. So go ahead and get those slides pulled up. I just saw if anyone needs an accountability buddy for this cohort. Thank you, Karen, for posting that. But yeah, if you don't have an accountability buddy, like please respond to that thread, or otherwise, if you're having trouble finding anybody, you can contact us as instructors, and we can help you get set up with somebody. Yeah, before I go too far into the slides, I want to think if there's any housekeeping stuff. I don't think there is anything major. So I think let's go ahead and get into these slides. And hopefully screen sharing works without a hitch. Let's find out. All right, so this is going to be a pretty short intro here. Can you all see my learning goals? We've got 4 of them up there. Cool. So our learning goals today, we're talking about one-to-many relationships. So first thing, we need to define primary key and foreign key. We talked about primary key in class, and I think a lot of you talked about foreign keys in check-ins yesterday. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time doing that together. We want to visualize one-to-many relationships. And when I say visualize the one-to-many relationships, I want to contrast this with what you all did in your project check-ins yesterday. So in your project check-ins, we wanted to look at your schema design from that dbdesigner.net. And the schema design is good for like showing the structure, the schema, so the way the tables and the columns are laid out. But when we're learning about these relationships, the most helpful thing that we can do is draw out the tables and the columns and add some rows of data into those tables and see the connection between data. So we're going to start doing that today, and that's going to become much more important when we get to many-to-many as well. So we're going to start like drawing out some one-to-many relationships today. We're also going to define database normalization, which is a key concept behind one-to-many relationships and just relational databases in general. And then we're going to do a little review on ORMs. So I've got this solo activity for you all. So as I said, I want you all to draw out a one-to-many relationship. I want you to draw out the one-to-many relationship from the pair project. So each of you should kind of have like your one-to-many relationship. I want you to draw out the tables and the columns. So this is going to be similar to what you did for your schema. But then I want you to also make sure you're drawing out rows on each of your tables. So include multiple rows on each of your tables. I also want you to draw arrows to show the connections between records, to show which records are associated together and specifically how they're associated. What's the like common data between them that associates them. Make sure you include enough data to represent the one and the many side of the relationship. So in class, we're going to be doing songs and artists. I wouldn't want to just create one song and one artist because then I can't really see the many part of that. Then after you've drawn out your one-to-many relationship, I want you to answer these questions. So these are kind of just like, you really need to know these things. Database normalization, I would say, is maybe not quite as important. It's something that I want you to have heard of and to kind of like have an idea what it is. It doesn't rise to the level of mastery on our learning goals. Then I want you to describe your relationship using the words has, many, and belongs to, and then do this review question on an ORM. And then after we come back, I'm going to get into just a little content on migrations before I send you off into the next activity. So I do want to, before we go off on our own, I want to show you the lesson plan here. So if I go over to my calendar, should be linked from the calendar. I'll just pull that up here. So I'm not going to go through this lesson plan together, and the reason is like this lesson plan is a great resource on its own. So I'm going to give you all a good chunk of solo work time. If you've looked through this lesson plan before, that's great. If you haven't, I would recommend that you look through this, you read through this as you are doing this activity. So when I say draw your one-to-many relationship from the pair project, well, you can kind of like follow along with this, and it's going to eventually get to kind of what I want that diagram to look like. So this lesson plan is a really great resource in general. And I think that's about it. It should, the lesson plan is a good reference for answering everything that I'm asking you to do here in this class. So again, we're not going to go through this lesson plan together. This is kind of your time to go through it. And when we come back together, I will ask some people to share what they came up with their diagrams. I'll ask some people to answer these questions, and then I'll field any questions you have. And so that'll be our first hour, and then we'll move into this migrations part, and we'll talk about that and go into the active record associations. I'm going to give you all 30 minutes to work on this on your own, and we will check in after that. So please just stay on this call, and if anything, if you all have any like questions, feel free to like unmute and ask. But I would just like you all to stay on this, and I'll bring you all back at I don't know. That's not quite fair. If you want to go, that's fine, and I'll give you all 30 minutes. We'll plan to come back together at 9:40. So if you don't want to stay on the call, if you just want to get off Zoom for a minute, that's fine. Just make sure you're back here at 9:40. And I will write that down and drop those instructions into the cohort channel as well. Does anyone have any questions about what I'm asking you to do? All right then. Yeah, so if you get stuck on anything, please just let Jameson and I know, either on this call or via DM. I'll be hanging out here, and I'll let you all go. All right, welcome back. As you're coming back, if y'all could please turn your videos on, just so I see that y'all are here. Cool, cool, cool. And I want to do some quick polling. So can I get a hand raised reaction if you feel like you need a little bit more time to work on this? You weren't quite able to complete the activity. Can I get a hand raise if you were able to complete the activity? Yeah, there we go. I'll go from the positive. End. Cool. So it looks like most people were able to finish this. So I think that's good. So let's go over this together. Can I get a? I'm going to lower everybody's hands. Can I get a volunteer to show us your diagram? What's your many-to-many relationship? How would you describe it? And yeah. Ben.
Yeah, so the one-to-many relationship that I came up with, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this very well, is a movie theater, and a movie theater has many employees, and an employee belongs to a movie theater. Did you want me to like describe the relationship with the keys and foreign keys, or?
Sure. Do you have the option to turn off your virtual background? It's kind of blocking the diagram.
Okay, cool. So, I don't know if you can read my chicken scratch.
Yeah.
But so you have a theater with, let's see if I can remember off the top of my head without reading backwards. A theater will have a name. It will have I think it's an is open Boolean status, as well as like a maximum capacity. And I forget what the other integer is. And then it has many employees, which have a name, and then their subsequent theater ID. I thought of it like, they have an ID badge where they, clock in and clock out. And then they have, their hours worked. I think the Boolean is something like if they're part-time or full-time, so like is full-time or something. And an employee belongs to a movie theater.
Great. So that was what you did there, Ben, is you did a really good job of describing the schema. What I don't see in your diagram is I don't see any data in those tables. So I think that's one thing. If you kind of like did the same version as Ben, where you like drew out the schema diagram as we drew it on the DB designer, that's okay. But I also want you all to add some rows of data so we can kind of see those connections. No, that's okay. So if you did that, I think that's like another thing I would want you all to work on this afternoon or whenever we have work time. But that's okay. Let's keep sharing. Who wants to go next? Jordan, why don't you go for it?
Yeah, take a shot at this. I'm going to try to do this. I'm not sure this is going to be inverted as well. Brought some colors into it because I get confused easily, and it's super sloppy, so sorry if you can't see this at all. But I'm doing schools and students. And so I have the top row here, students with their primary keys in blue over there and their names. And we have if they need financial aid or not. And then what is it? School days completed. And then school ID on the far right there. And those colors correspond to the, go this way, primary keys on schools over here. And then we have the names of the schools: Turing, Pikes Peak Community College, University of Colorado Springs. And then days in the school year, whether or not they accept financial aid or not. And one of the categories in students was whether or not they need financial aid. So those all kind of correspond and whatnot. I'm not sure.
That looks good. Looks great. That's a little bit more of what I was expecting you all to draw. And that the reason why I want you to draw that is because that's how the data is going to be laid out in your table. I think we mentioned this on Tuesday's class, but this database, these columns and these tables and these rows, I really want you to visualize as like a two-dimensional space, these two-dimensional tables, and seeing like each row populating below the next one. So visualizing these database concepts is really important. Can I get another volunteer? Does anyone have a version on, oh, go for it, Doug.
I did mine on the computer, and I don't know if you guys can see that, if it's sharing. I couldn't draw arrows.
I just see your
so
Slack.
We see your Slack.
My Slack? That's weird. Why is that? And it won't let me go back. Let's try this one more time. My computer can't decide what monitor is what monitor, and it is constantly changing it on me. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Cool. So what I did is I color-coded instead of arrows because I couldn't get arrows to work in Sheets. But basically, I have a membership to an off-road club, and every member can have one or many or none at all vehicles. So you have your ID, name, skill level of the driver, whether they're a premium member or not. And each member can have many vehicles, but each vehicle belongs to a member. So James has 2 vehicles, while Doug and Emily only have 1 vehicle, and Alex does not have any vehicles.
Awesome. Looks good. I wanted to see if we can do a little experiment here. So when I'm looking at Doug's shared screen, I see view options, and under that, I have an option for annotate. Does anyone else have that, or is that just me because I'm the host?
That's just you.
Just you.
Okay.
I can annotate.
I see annotate on mine.
Yeah,
Was
I
that
have mine as
Harrison?
well.
Yeah,
So-
I see it.
Harrison, do you want to click on that button and see, like, can you just draw on Doug's screen a little bit?
How dare you?
You gonna see that? I drew a green
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. So I don't know if maybe like that's like a Zoom update thing or something, that some people have it. So Harrison, do you think you could draw some, so Doug, yeah, getting arrows to work in Excel, maybe not the easiest thing, but Harrison, do you think you could like draw, so Doug was saying like, Doug has this vehicle and James has these vehicles. Can you like connect visually how those rows are related?
Yeah, so I think it's just because they're all like straight across kind of this ID. Just because he color coded them, I think it makes it easier. Let's see, his member ID is 1, and then this ID is 1. So I'm trying to draw arrows. Sorry, I don't have a mouse. I'm drawing on my mouse pad. And then these 2 both go here. Both of these, because their member ID is 2, and then this one member ID is 3, so that goes there. And then the last one doesn't have a car, so no member ID.
Harrison, do you have like an annotate like toolbar thing?
Yeah, I do. I have like eraser. I have all those settings.
If you click on draw, do you see the option for arrows?
Okay, I do. I should.
Cool.
You want me to undo it and then just do those, or?
Yeah, let's do it again, because I think that this is, I think this could be useful for future classes as well. So before you go too much further, I want to give you one piece of feedback, and then I'm going to let you go again. So these arrows that you're drawing, what it looks like to me is like you're relating the rows together, but I want you to start like this. To me, it looks like this arrow is starting at this ID column. I want you to specifically point out like which piece of data in this table connects to which piece of data in the other table.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if is there a way to do like squiggly arrows?
Probably not.
I don't know.
Yeah, 'cause I can only do like straight. So I'll try it with the. It's just gonna like go through is why.
You could like
That's
wrap
fine.
it around the right side of the screen.
if
So you
you-
point to the right and then bring it in on the left side.
I could switch which sides these
If you
tables are
move
on, too.
one table, yeah, move it to
We're collaborating on this one. Yeah, Doug, you move the table, and then Harrison's gonna draw it.
Yeah, that'd work.
Yeah.
Okay, so specifically, oh, it disappeared. There we go. Specifically, this member ID from this member is pointing to this like whole column.
Yes.
And then specifically, this member ID and this member ID are pointing to James, and then this member ID is pointing to Emily.
Yes, awesome. So can I get another volunteer? Can you describe how these are connected and use the can you describe what's a primary key, what's a foreign key, and in this diagram, what are our primary keys and foreign keys? Can I get another volunteer? Jake.
So on his actual members table, the primary key is ID. On the vehicles table, the primary key is also ID. And then on the vehicles table, the foreign key is members ID. And that's what Harrison drew the beautiful arrows over to the members to show how they match up foreign to primary.
Exactly. So that key point that you said there, Jake, is that our foreign keys from one table are going to match a primary key on another table. And that's what our arrows are doing right there. Awesome. Yeah, I think that this is pretty good. And so we use the words has many and belongs to. So in this case, members have many. We can see that the James record in the members table has two arrows pointing to it. So that's the many relationship. And then each one of those records on the vehicles belongs to, it's pointing to a specific vehicle. Yeah, and that's a nice thing to add, Doug, is adding in a nice table name above each of those tables. Cool. Does anyone have any, so I'm going to get into what is normalization and then what is an ORM next, but does anybody have any other questions while I have this diagram up or anything else you'd like to see? I see Ben has a hand up.
I'm just wondering if it would ever be the case, or if it might be, if there's some use for having a table that has multiple foreign keys that may be linked to different tables.
Yeah, sure. So this will be kind of a theme throughout this mod, but what we show you with foreign keys and relationships, and when we get to many, we'll have like relationships that go through other relationships. You can definitely like apply these concepts as widely as you want. So in this case, we could add, we could imagine maybe a scenario where a member, oh, I'm getting a little confused. Doug, I think you switched the table names.
I did. I totally did.
That's okay.
I don't know. Alex is a pretty cool off-road vehicle.
So in this case, off-road vehicles has a member's ID. Maybe I'm trying to think of like another thing an off-road vehicle could belong to. So maybe it could belong to like a, Doug, do you have an idea?
Well, like you could have for where I have make and model, that could be manufacturer, and that could relate to a manufacturer ID that would have all the specs for a given vehicle type.
Yeah, so just like in the lesson plan, so the lesson plan stores an artist on a song, and then we say, well, what if we wanted to store more artist information? We wouldn't just want to keep adding that on to the songs. So maybe in this case, if we wanted more manufacturer information, we could break that out into its own table and then just have a manufacturer ID. Yeah, that's a great example. So Ben, to answer your question, yes, tables can definitely have multiple foreign keys, but you can't use them to make a many-to-many. And I'll just say that for now, and we'll kind of cover many-to-many more on next Friday. Great. Other questions? All right. Let's go, Doug. I'm going to stop your screen sharing here. Thank you very much. That was great. And let's. Can I get a volunteer to answer what is database normalization? Genevieve, I'll get to you next. What is database normalization? Genevieve?
I'll give a stab at it.
Go for it.
So it's the process of breaking down the data so that we kind of avoid duplicative information and allows us to relate tables one to another so that we can avoid repeating ourselves, kind of dry up the code, right?
Yeah, awesome. So I love that you're making that connection back to dry. That's something that I mentioned in class on Tuesday, but that dry principle doesn't just apply to like Ruby code, that applies to us as developers. So in the same way we don't want to repeat ourselves in our code, we don't want to repeat ourselves in our database either. What could be a potential problem if we repeated data in multiple places in the database? Genevieve, do you want to go or bump to another classmate?
Yeah, I can go. It means that you have to update it and maintain it in multiple areas so that in the event that that data changes, if you don't realize that it's stored in more than one place, you will have mismatching records.
Yeah, perfect. Well, let's go to the next one. Genevieve, did you have another question before I move on?
So I was just curious about primary keys in general. I know you had mentioned yesterday that for now we're always using an ID, but a primary key can technically be anything so long as it's unique.
Yes,
is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So in Rails, and when we generate our migrations, that ID column just like auto generates for us, and it plays nicely with Rails. So that primary key being called ID is another convention in Rails that we kind of just follow, and it makes our lives a lot easier. Rather than us trying to like customize the name, we'll just stick with the one that Rails gives us by default.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Adam.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how many, like when you have multiple columns and you're using a primary key, how many of those columns can be null? I mean, I realize that like there could be kind of a confusion about like assigning a primary or having two different primary keys for something that's really the same or vice versa. I guess I just read something that said that like there should be no null values in the columns, but that doesn't seem to be quite accurate because I feel like I've seen stuff where there is like one column where they'll have like a null value for like a name or something like that.
Yeah, so first of all, null is very similar to nil in Ruby. It just represents the absence of something. It represents nothing really. So yeah, it's not that you can't have null values in your database. That is fine if it makes sense. So if we go back to the like off-road vehicle examples, maybe like maybe we store like make, model, and color. But maybe one of them is just like unpainted or something, and so we just have null for color until we add in a color, something like that. Yeah, so it's not that you can't have null values. Primary keys, however, have more specific constraints. When we get to things like primary keys and foreign keys, that's when we might have constraints where you cannot have a null value. You have to have some information there. Yeah, does that answer your question, Adam?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Alexa.
So I'm wondering about foreign keys. Do they need to be like specifically assigned, or is there a way they can be almost inherited from the parent? Or as a developer, are we always?
So I would say that inheriting them from the parent, that is what we're going to use ActiveRecord associations for. So that's going to be the next lesson plan. Yeah. Jordan.
Just wondering if, referring back to the null values we were just talking about, are we going to get to talking about like setting default values and stuff like that at some point, or?
I don't think we, so I'm not going to talk about it in class. I don't think that it is, I think it's somewhere in one of the lesson plans, and I'm not exactly sure, but I would say like using default values is a great, is very handy. And I think that's something that you all can research on your own. The way that you would do it is you would add it into a migration. And the syntax is pretty straightforward for doing it as well. So I think that's definitely within y'all's reach to research on your own and figure it out.
Cool.
Other questions, or if I could get someone to answer the final question, what's an ORM? Why would we use an ORM? And what is ActiveRecord? Joseph?
Yeah, an ORM is an object relational mapper, which is going to take raw data from SQL. It lives in between. So like an ORM is ActiveRecord most commonly for Ruby, which they are the same thing, right? Like it defines ActiveRecord. Or ActiveRecord is a type of ORM, I should say.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to take that raw data. Each column of data is going to become an object.
Not quite, not each column.
Each row, sorry.
Each row, yep. So a row in our database is a record, is like a single entry. So each one of those is a single object. You got it. Joseph, you said that it sits in between. What are the two things that it's sitting in between?
It's going to sit in between the Rails application and the database.
Exactly. Great job. Do you have anything for why would we use an ORM, or I'll open up to everybody for ideas? Why would we use an ORM? Jeremiah?
So I guess we can turn our database into actual objects so we can work inside our Rails app.
Yeah, so it just makes it, it makes it so that we can use them in the Rails app. Maybe I'll ask this question like this, Jeremiah, like, do you like working with objects?
Yes.
Yes, you do. You're an object-oriented developer, so yeah, we like working with objects. Yeah. There are some other things that we talked about on Tuesday for ORM, like it adds in security. It does some other cool stuff for us, but the main thing is we just want to be able to work with them in Ruby. Awesome. So I think that is about it for this first lesson. Yeah, so let's go ahead and take, we can do, we'll come back together at 10:10. So please take a minute or two to open up the survey for this class and leave me some feedback, and then take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back together at 10:10. All right, everybody. As you're coming back, go ahead and turn those videos back on so I can see your wonderful happy faces. And we'll get started with the next class here. I have a theory that maybe the animations on my slides is what's causing Zoom to freak out. So we'll test that here. Can you all see my first bullet point? Okay, so we'll see how long this lasts. So migrations. We haven't talked about migrations too much in class yet, so I'm going to do that here. And then in the next lesson plan, so the lesson plan yesterday that I had you all work through went over migrations a little bit. This next lesson plan is going to have you go over them, go over them in a little bit more detail. I wanted to take some time to talk about it just so you can kind of like let this information sink in as you're working through this next lesson. And then additionally, the lesson plan is going to cover some other very key concepts, namely active record associations. So migrations, you can think of this as instructions for how to change your schema. Remember, the schema is how the data is organized into tables and columns. So essentially, migrations are instructions for how to change all those things. So for example, we could create a table with a migration. We could add a column to a table with a migration. We could remove a column. You could use an add and remove to change a column. You could change the data type of a column. You could rename one of those things. So there are a lot of different ways to make migrations. Yeah, I'll keep going. So the migration files themselves are instructions. You also need to run them with this Rails DB migrate command. So we use a Rails generator to make the migration. We sometimes edit that file, and then we have to run them, or we could say apply the migrations with this Rails DB migrate command. So this is a command that you absolutely have to know and should be using very frequently. The way that this Rails DB migrate command works is that it's going to check the schema version at the top of your schema file, and it's going to check it against your migration versions. So each migration has a version timestamp on it, and it's just going to check, has this one been run yet? And if it hasn't, then it's going to run. You can think of this Rails DB migrate as a safe command. I think of safe commands as like just commands that you can run and really not worry about it messing anything up. So like if you're using git status is a good safe command. Like you can always run git status and don't worry about if it's going to like commit something or delete something from your git repo. You can always just run it. Same thing with Rails DB migrate. If there are migrations that need to be run, you're going to have to run them anyway. You might have seen an error before that says migrations are pending. So if you have any migrations that haven't been run, you actually can't use any part of your Rails app. If there aren't any migrations to run and you run this, it'll just do nothing. So that's why it's safe. So migrations are a way for us to keep track of the history of our schema changes. So if each migration is an instruction for how to change the schema, the sum of the migrations is the history that the schema went through. So this is very useful when we need to look back in time to get some insight into how the schema has changed. So if the migration files keep track of how the schema has changed over time, the schema.rb file is like a snapshot of what the current schema is. What is the sum of all of these migrations? Well, it results into this one overall schema for my application. The migrations are very useful because they allow us to share our schema easily. So remember, your actual database, the database is not part of your Rails app. The database is a separate entity, and it is connected to your Rails app through the ORM, through ActiveRecord. So what this means is that you can't push your database to GitHub. You can't share the database itself or easily share the database, and you can't do it through GitHub. So when you commit something, you don't commit your database. What you do commit is you commit your migrations. So the migrations are part of your Rails app. So if someone needs to build up their schema, you don't share the database directly, but you share the instructions for how to create the database. So you can push these migrations to GitHub, and other developers can pull them down and run the migrations against their own local database. So in your pair project, you will have separate databases on each of your computers, but the migration files should be exactly the same. So when you run Rails DB migrate, each of your schemas should look exactly the same. So while we don't share the database, the instructions for the database are the exact same. This is a note here that I want you to be aware of. There are some Rails commands that will load your schema.rb file, but typically we want to avoid using those. We want to use our migrations. So there is a command, I think it's Rails DB schema load, which will not look at your migrations and will just look at your schema file and just use that as to make the current database schema. But typically you want to avoid that. You want to use your migrations in your Rails DB migrate command.
Yeah, I ran into something yesterday where I had to change an attribute through migration, and I found that the way that I was doing it could become messy very quickly if you're like using larger databases than the ones we're using. This might be a question for another time, but I was just like wondering, is there a cleaner way to do it than having to create a whole other migration file?
No, and you
Okay.
do want to create new migration files.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get into that in the next slide.
Cool.
Jordan.
I was wondering about the use of was it DB setup and DB reset?
Mm-hmm.
Are those something we should maybe hold off on trying to use too much until we understand the parts that compose?
Yeah, so I would say avoid using DB setup and DB reset because they use other, it's kind of like a 3-in-1 kind of command. And so rather than use that, I would prefer to use the like specific step-by-step instructions of create. The Rails DB commands you should know right now are, or you should know by the end of this project, are create, migrate, and seed. And we'll get into seed today in the lesson.
Cool, thank you.
Also Rails DB drop. Now you don't want to be like dropping your database in a production environment. So as I mentioned earlier this week, production environment is like your real life running app. This is where people are actually using your app and adding data to it. So we wouldn't want to drop that database. But running Rails DB drop on your local database is totally fine because your local is just like development kind of playground sandbox type of thing. So again, that was Rails DB create, migrate, seed, drop. Okay, so let's talk about workflow with migrations. So Rails G migration, this is what you've seen in the lesson plans and you're going to see again today. This will generate a migration file for you. So Rails generators, the Rails G command is short for Rails generate. There are other generators where you can generate models and controllers, and I think you can generate resources. We did say in the project kickoff that it's okay to use Rails generators. Typically, I recommend staying away from it for the exact reason of why I don't want you to use Rails DB reset. It kind of does a lot for you, and I prefer that you understand what's going on under the hood before you use the generators. The migrations are a little bit different. We do need to use this generator mainly because it's going to give us a timestamp. So I mentioned before that when you run Rails DB migrate, it checks the timestamp of the migration against the schema version. And if you are manually writing in that timestamp, you could like make a mistake. So we use the Rails generator mostly to generate the file and the file name and the file name with the timestamp in it for us. I believe I'm sharing my desktop here. Yeah, that's not a good example. I'll save that for another time. So we're going to use this Rails generator to create this migration. You can and should edit this file. So I think I got a question earlier this week, and this is a very common notion from students. It's like, this file is generated for me, I shouldn't change this, right? That's not the case. You should be editing these migration files. You will have to edit these migration files. We use the Rails generator to get close to, we try to use that to take advantage of it to make as much of the migration as we can, but it often falls short and we need to like just go in and change it ourselves. This is different than the schema file. You should not edit the schema file directly. The schema file should only be changed by you running your migrations. You will need to research how to do certain things with migrations not shown in class. So in class, we'll show you how to create tables, add references to tables. But if you make a mistake and you need to change something, that is something you are going to have to research on your own. And that's intentional. We want you to research this on your own. We want you to have that experience. That is a learning goal, is that you all are researching things and implementing them. I want to talk about this idea of fix forward, and this kind of gets at Joseph's question. So you make a mistake, you need to change something. We typically don't want to go back in time and edit old migrations to fix your schema. This is kind of like you're rewriting history, and it can really like throw things off if if the current version of the schema says one thing, but then your migrations, you go back in time to make it say another thing, and your migrations and your schema can get all out of sync. So we don't want to go back in time and edit old migrations. What we want to do instead is create new migrations to fix the mistake. So in other parts of our code where we really want to try and be like concise and as short as possible and not repeat ourselves, migrations sometimes get bulky. We have a lot of migration files, and that's okay. We don't need to worry about our migrations being super pretty. We're going to have a lot of them, and we just accept that. That's okay. And that's all the content that I have for you all. So I'll take some questions. Let's hear from Jake.
Yeah, you kind of answered the question, but I'm a little confused. So
Sure.
if we can edit a migration file, but we're not supposed to go back in time and edit a migration file, should we only be editing like the most recent migration file, or only editing the most recent migration file if we haven't like used any of that tables to create data yet?
Yeah, you're on the right track. So if you can edit a migration, but you don't want to go back in time and edit migrations, that means the only migration you should be editing is the current one, whatever the most recent one is. So what that process would look like is we run Rails G migration to generate the file for us, and then we edit it, but we're editing it before we run Rails DB migrate. So you want to edit it before you execute the migration.
So that's kind of the breakpoint, is that once Rails DB migrate is run, that's a safe command. It's okay. It's not going to break anything. But once you run that, don't edit your migration file after that.
Yeah, you can think of it as like now all of a sudden that's part of the history, and now it's in the past. It's been run.
Okay.
Now, if this is too much for you all and you want to just ignore what I'm about to say, like that's totally fine. You don't need to do this, but you could run another command called Rails DB rollback, which will try to undo the most recent migration. And then in that case, it would be okay to like go in and edit it. So that is like one way you could go about it. But I think especially for this first project, that might be a little bit too much. So if you just want to like know that you're on a good workflow, the workflow would be after you've applied a migration with Rails DB migrate, you should never go back and edit it. You should make a new one to fix something. Kyle.
When my partner and I merged our stuff up to GitHub, our separate branches, we had some conflicts in the schema file. And I was just curious, like, how careful we need to be when it comes to sort of like hashing out those merge conflicts in such a way that like it looks like a perfect join between our two separate schema files.
Yeah, I believe I did this with one of the groups in the check-ins yesterday. So this is a good thing for us to talk about together. So the schema file, as I said, is like the sum of your migrations. So what I would probably do in that case, if there was like a merge conflict in my schema file and I was like using the merge conflict resolver to put them together, what I would probably do is I would just delete the schema file and run Rails DB migrate and have it generate the schema file again for me, so that I don't have to worry about me as a developer, like trying to make sure that the schema file looks good. I'll just let Rails take care of generating it for me.
Okay, and one other question is, what does rake DB migrate or DB rollback do?
So I think there's two separate points there. So one is you might see some commands, everything that I've talked about with like Rails DB something, there is a version of those commands where you can run rake DB something. So for instance, you could run rake DB create, rake DB migrate. The rake version is kind of like the old way of doing things. So I would say just use the Rails version of commands and stay away from rake for now. Under the hood, the Rails commands will worry about using rake for you. So that's kind of like abstracted away. You don't need to worry about it. I think the second question there is, what does the rollback command do? And that one is going to attempt to undo the most recent migration. One gotcha with the rollback command is that sometimes ActiveRecord isn't smart enough to know how to reverse a migration. So it doesn't always work. Does that answer your question, Kyle? Do you have any follow-up there?
No, that answers it. I think I feel like I've done like 7 rollbacks on this project because I keep having to go back and edit my migrations, and I feel like I just need to learn how to create new ones that do that editing for me. So.
Yeah. So if you fall into a pattern where you're like rolling back often, try and stay away from rollback and use something else, because typically we don't want to roll back too far, or then we really like get too far back into the past. Ben.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why you wouldn't just like delete old migration files, because if it creates a new file every time, or like creates a new migration, and you're like editing and changing and doing new migrations all the time, if you know your data is changing, why you wouldn't just remove old migrations at that point?
Yeah, the reason is because typically old migrations are a stepping stone to get to the next point of the next migration. So let me draw that. This will probably be easiest. Do I have a option? There it is. Cool. Okay, can you all see my squares? Got some squares. Okay, so let's say like this is like a timeline. So going left to right, left is in the past, right is the present. So this is like our first migration. We'll say that's M1. This is our second migration. This is M2, and this is our third migration, M3. So as we build, the schema is sequential instructions for how to build, or sorry, the migrations are sequential instructions for how to build the schema. So we start with nothing, then M1 creates another version of schema, which then that M2 runs on top of. So if I label these arrows, I would say maybe migration 1 creates S1, which is our first version of our schema. Well, then migration 2 is going to run on top of that schema version and create S2. and then M3 is going to run off of that schema version. So if you were to go back in time and then say delete this M2 migration right here, it's likely that now we don't have this S2 version, we don't have this schema version. So now this third migration is trying to run off of the first version of the schema, and it might not be able to do that. For instance, if the second migration created a table and then the third migration edited that table that we're trying to edit no longer exists, and we're going to get an error like can't find relation for whatever table you're trying to add. So you can't really, if you kind of like break the link, if you remove an old migration, it's kind of like breaking the link from one migration to the next. So what we would, I would say the only time it's okay to delete a migration is if you are deleting the most recent one. So if we delete this one, the third one, we're not really breaking the link to the next migration because there is no next migration. So that would be okay to delete like whatever, this is kind of a theme, whatever the like most recent migration is, it would probably be okay to like edit or change and roll back that one. But going further back in time is typically not a good idea.
So then I'm still just kind of a little, so like you have to have every step of like the history of creation, but then couldn't you like, the goal of that is to have like be working with the most up-to-date version of a schema and a database. Is that correct?
That's one of the goals, but another goal is to also have that history of changes.
Okay.
Yeah, if we just wanted to get what the most current version of the schema is, well, that's your schema file. But that's not all we want. We also want to keep track of that history. Chris.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about timestamps. In our project, we used timestamps and created that as a date time in our migration. And then in the database, it didn't duplicate. Like there was only one column for created at. I was wondering if that's like some sort of edge case we should be worried about down the road, or just if you heard about that.
No, I haven't heard about that. And I'm surprised that's how that worked. I would say in that case, I would, I don't know. I don't think I would worry about it too much as long as my schema file looked okay. So because the migrations change your schema, the way you can check if your migration did what you wanted it to do is look at the schema file. Does my schema now look like how I want it to look like? And if it does, then migration was successful. My migration was successful.
Thanks. Yeah, the schema looks good. I was just curious if it was something like down the road we should worry about. So thank you.
Yeah, I think you should be good. Erica.
Okay, so obviously as students, we're probably going to mess up a little more often right now, and we'll have to create new migrations to kind of like fix mistakes or add new things that we didn't think about in the beginning or whatever. But I'm wondering about once we get into a job, is it still common to have to create these new migrations to fix old errors, or should we try to like prevent that from happening? Like, should we try to prevent from having to create new migrations?
So I would say right now, as you're learning, you're going to make mistakes way more often than you will in like week 3. Just because Rails has so many like spelling things that it needs things to be spelled right. So you just like type an S where you shouldn't type an S, or you capitalize something where it shouldn't be capitalized, then you have to go fix it. So I'd say right now, while you're trying to get used to just all these Rails conventions, you are going to make mistakes a lot more often. So yeah, on the job, we typically, on the job, your development process will be extended a little bit longer. So rather than finish, 20 user stories in a week or two, you should have more time. You shouldn't be that crunched for time. So I would say like, yeah, on the job, you want to like double check your migrations more frequently, really make sure that they look like how you want to. And if they don't, then delete them and try again. So as I said, like deleting this most recent one would be okay. So I would probably like not make another migration until I was super sure that my most recent one looks good. I'm curious if Jameson, do you have any other thoughts? Do I have Jameson on the call?
Yeah. Nothing really to add there. I mean, that has been pretty accurate in my experience. The main experience I have with like migrations and stuff like that was part of a 3-month-long effort for a new feature. And I had, probably 2 weeks to get the migrations right. And I still messed them up. I still missed like the created at and updated at timestamps. And then I had, another probably 3 days or so to collaborate with another engineer and make sure that we put in a fix that would also backfill the data that was missing some of those timestamps. So yeah, there is a lot more time to just kind of vet them and make sure that they're doing what you want them to do. And I think it just gets easier the more you do it. So making a lot of mistakes on migrations here in week 1 and 2 is probably a good thing just to get the practice.
Yeah. The way that I will choose to look at it is your mistakes on your migrations are just more opportunities for you to learn about migrations.
Exactly.
Erica, do you have any follow-up on that?
Well, I think I'm worrying a little bit too much about what others will think of me in this question, but I'm just wondering, are we going to be looked at as kind of like a noob if we are making too many new migrations on the job?
Jameson, what do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, at a good company, I think that would maybe come up in a PR review. And if it was too many migrations, there would be a fix or a solve. But I would much rather see tons and tons of migrations than see like some weird missing data or like Brian was describing, a missing link of a deleted migration. Yeah, I do think it'll get easier with time, and you probably don't have to worry too much about that. Like looking bad at the end of the day, if you're running a lot of migrations, to make sure you have it right, that shows a lot of attention to detail. So just my take though.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the answer is no. Like you don't need to worry about looking bad because you create too many migrations. Yeah. Jacob.
Yeah, so I think I noticed when we do like the migration G command that it automatically makes like the primary key for us. And I was wondering if like when we're looking for a foreign, like if there's a foreign key in a migration we're creating, does Rails have a smart way of like looking at other schemas or migrations and saying, oh, that's going to be the foreign key? I don't know if that question makes sense.
So I will say this, in this next lesson plan that we're going to work through, there's a special syntax that just makes connecting foreign keys between tables a lot easier. Does that help, Jacob?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. And then, yeah, as you pointed out, it's really important to point out when we use that create table migration, it will just make that ID column for us. You can't see it anywhere in the migration. Rails just does it for us. And that's kind of back to Genevieve's point earlier. You could like rename that column, but it would just throw Rails off. Ben.
I think I was making a distinction that isn't really there, and I was wondering if the migration file or like that history has anything like any connection with the runtime of like a client sending a request and then having, I think where I was drawing a distinction that's not there is that the database would include compiling all those migrations in that request and having it sent back. But that has like no, like if you have a billion migration files, that still, it doesn't affect the runtime of or I'm asking, does it affect the runtime of like loading a page and information and stuff like that?
No, it does not affect the loading. So
Okay,
when you run your migrations, you just need to run them once to create your schema. And then once your schema is created, when people use your application, like the schema is good, your database is good to go. So yeah, it will not like rebuild the schema every time or like multiple times. You just need to do it once.
Okay,
so when you run commands from the command line, like Rails DB, whatever, that is the point in time when you are executing some some command, which contrasts that with your code, which is the thing that's going to run every time someone visits our application.
Okay, cool. That makes more sense.
You're welcome. I saw another hand up, but I think it went down. Oh, Andrew.
Yeah, so just trying to get some like clarification. I think I was a little confused. I got it to work, but so when I was doing the migration to add our parent to our child, and it creates like the foreign key for you, I already had the foreign key inside of the table for my child, and so it was giving me like, oh, it's a duplicate basically. We can't create this foreign key because that column already exists. And so I had to go back and remove that. I had to delete that migration file and then create a new one where I remove that column and then go back and do the migration to add the parent to the child and do that over again. So that foreign key shouldn't be created until we actually do this next part where we migrate the team, or I'm sorry, the parent to the child. Is that correct?
So if you needed to change a column and you went back and deleted the migration that created that column, and then you wrote another migration that removed that column, that would be an example of like you've edited your history and you've broken your link. You've broken your link from one migration to the next. So when another developer tries to pull down your migrations and run them, when they get to the command that's like remove this column, well, in their schema, they don't have that column because you've removed the migration that created the column. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't do that. I was like I did the Rails G migration, like add parent to child, and that was like the most recent one I did, and that's what I had to delete because it was trying to create the foreign key column that I already had created. So then I had to go back and do another migration to remove that column, and then I could go back and do the add a parent to child migration.
That sounds like the correct workflow.
Yeah, I was just a little confused on like the creation of that foreign key column because it seemed like it was doing it for me when I added the parent to the child, and I'd already created that column and it ran into a problem there.
I'm not sure I quite follow. No, what was the thing that was unexpected there for you?
So
Andrew,
I had already.
Hey, Andrew, let me ask you this. Did you use the same column names when you tried to do that? Like the same column name that you already have? If you did, then that's probably where you're running into the problem with. If you would have name that foreign key column differently, you probably wouldn't have run into the problem, right?
Yeah, I had already created the column inside of my child table. That was the foreign key. Mine's teams and players, so it was team ID. And then when I was adding the teams to players,
teams ID again.
Yeah, I wanted my foreign key to be the team ID, and it was saying that column already existed. So I had to go back and remove that original foreign key that I had set up and have the migration do it itself.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Okay, I was just we can like hold off on creating the actual foreign key column until we like connect the two, the parent and child.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you can and you don't have to connect them. You don't have to create the child and connect it all in one migration. In fact, I think in this lesson plan, it'll do them in 2 steps. It'll create the child table and then it will create the connection between the two.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Cool. So I think this was a good good conversation on migrations. I definitely wanted to make sure we set aside some time to talk about this. I'm going to share again. And I'm going to have you all work through this lesson plan solo this morning. So just a little bit on this lesson plan. So we're going to start doing this in class where we are going to have this set list repo right here. So in setup, it says this lesson builds off the handling request lesson that you all did yesterday. You can find the completed code on the handling requests branch of this repo. So if I click on this, this is the repo where we're going to track all of the completed code from setlist. So the setlist app that we started yesterday, we're just going to keep building onto that throughout the class, but we're not going to, we're going to have this repo as kind of like a dumping ground for all of the completed code. If at any point you don't have a copy on your local computer, or you just want to pull down a fresh, clean copy, something that you know that works, that's what I would recommend you all do. And this is your reference for that. So what you can do is you can just clone this down. And if you clone this down, you should get access to all of these branches. So you should be able to clone down and say, check out handling requests, and then just start right from the beginning of this lesson plan. It should take you right through working through that. We are planning on doing a Git refresher class next week, which will kind of walk you through a little bit more on like how you could pull down new code or check out branches easier. But for now, I think the easiest thing for you all to do is either work off your own local copy from yesterday if you completed, or if you didn't complete, clone down and check out that handling request branch. Does anyone have any questions about that? How to get set up for this? Okay, the second thing that I want to go over is this TDD version here. So this is a little bit of choose your own adventure. So we are going to, Jameson is going to talk to you all about feature testing in the afternoon class. If you're feeling, if you feel like you're on top of things and you really want to kind of like challenge yourself and push yourself to add in the next new thing, you can click on this TDD version, and this will take you through writing the test first. So no, you definitely don't have to do this if you're just like, I just want to work on this active record associations thing. I don't know what this is, and I want to make sure I understand it. Then don't do this TDD version. That's fine. If you do this TDD version, just make sure that you also go back to the regular version and look at this this section on seeds. So there's not a section on seeds in the TDD version. And I think that is about it. You don't need to do this warm up. You can just go straight into models, migrations, databases, and Rails.
Quick question, Brian.
Yeah.
Yesterday when we were doing the set list, only one of us created the Rails app and all that. So should like the person who's navigating go through all that again real quick before we get into the lesson today?
I don't think so, because I think it will, I think just time-wise, that will be difficult. So if you were not the person who has the code on your computer, go ahead and clone down the repo and check out that handling request branch. That's the easiest thing to do.
Should we fork first or just pull it down?
Just pull it down.
Okay.
So you only need to fork when you're going to submit back to the original repo, because this is just classwork for us. No need to fork.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to like keep it as a repo on our GitHub for some reason.
Gotcha. No, I don't think so. I think just locally. This is just
Okay.
like a learning tool. Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions? I'll plan to give you all until 11:30, so 40 minutes to work on your own. Yeah, Doug, what's up?
So you said that if we're going through the TDD version, we'll need to do the seeds portion from the other one. Is there a point when we should like come back to the seeds portion, or should we just read that before we slide over to the TDD?
I think just do this last. Work through the whole TDD version and then jump into the seeds. The reason why there's no seeds in the TDD version is because you don't test your seeds. There's no testing involved with this. So yeah, just make sure you look at this after you work through the lesson plan.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? All right, y'all, same deal as before. If you want to jump out off of this call and just kind of work, just come back at 11:30. I'm gonna keep my video off and my mic off, but I'm gonna take a pump here and then come back. And yeah, if you have questions, feel free to like just unmute and ask. Yeah.
Brian, you're still sharing your screen.
Well, maybe I just want you all to learn about Jekyll Algolia and all the wonderful things that it does.
It works.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
No problem.
I have a question.
Yes, what's that?
When I run Rails DB migrate, I'm getting an error. Well, not an error, I guess. Yeah, I am getting an error. Rails aborted, standard error, an error has occurred. Songs already exists.
Yeah. So what you're running into is that's like a mismatched versioning issue. So your schema version sees that like create songs migration, and it sees that as not being run yet, I believe. Can you share your screen? I don't.
Yeah. Sorry.
You're good. And did you clone down this repo?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I think what happened, were you navigate or driving yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened is you, as you were working through this, you like created your own database and schema version, but now that you've cloned out a new repo, the database and schema versions are kind of off. So what we want to do is we kind of just want to start from the beginning. So this is a case where we could do a Rails DB drop.
Okay.
And we're just kind of starting from scratch. So now we'll do a Rails DB create.
Okay.
Yep. And now hopefully our migrate will be synced up with our new database.
Okay, so if I just do DB migrate.
Yep, hopefully.
Okay.
There you go.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So what does drop do exactly?
Drop will delete the database completely. So your database that you had, because you created your database when you were working on your version, and then you just cloned down a different version, your versions got misaligned. So we just recreated everything from scratch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ryan, I have a quick question, or Jameson, either one.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, so I'm doing the test route, and here, let me share my screen. Okay, so I added this to my Rails helper.rb over here, and then I added this to my artist spec, and then it's saying whenever I run RSpec, I should be getting an error saying uninitialized constant artist, but instead it's something's messing up in my Rails helper.
Can you scroll up in this lesson plan?
Yes.
Can you go up a little further? Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this. Yeah. Yeah. So you're missing some like other setup things that this lesson doesn't walk you through. Dang. What's the easiest way to get around this?
I can, because we are writing our test in our project, so I can copy that our Rails helper file and spec helper, create a spec helper.
It's better to if we auto generate them rather than copying them over. Can you open up your gem file? And if anybody else is on the call and is working through the TDD version, you might need this. Go down to your development test block. Yeah.
I actually ran into this too and had to add RSpec Rails to the gem development.
Yeah.
to be able to like generate an RSpec file. Like, cause
Yeah, let's do that. RSpec,
Like
it's
that?
going to be RSpec dash Rails. Yeah. And then let's do a bundle from the command line. Make sure that it's installed. And now let's do Rails G just like that, RSpec : install.
Like that?
Yep. And it'll probably say Rails helper already exists. Can we overwrite it? That's exactly what it says. So type Y for yes to overwrite your Rails helper. And now let's open up your Rails helper. And now you've got a bunch of other stuff in there. So now you want to
okay.
copy that shoulda matchers block and paste it into the bottom. Yeah.
Sweet. Now I should run RSpec and then get the what does that mean?
Do you know how to fix this?
No.
So it says
Oh,
the
DB
database doesn't
create.
exist. Yeah, there you go.
Oops. Oh no.
There we go. And we can see it even says created database setlist test.
Oh yeah. Yes, I did see that before I cleared it.
Yeah, you're good. So let's see if RSpec works.
What's the difference between RSpec and spec? Or like, what's the difference between running just solely RSpec versus RSpec spec?
There will be no difference.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Now I get the error that I should.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, what's up?
Just for the future, I don't know if I missed something that in the instructions that it was supposed to download, but I was just listening to what you were doing with Angel, and I was like losing my mind. I thought I was losing my mind because it kept saying like, do it in the spec directory. It was like, there is no spec directory, but that was because I didn't have RSpec installed on the machine. So there should probably just be something on it that says install the spec before.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
Let me do a quick fix here. And I think I'm just going to paste this into the main cohort channel.
Cool, thank you.
Hey, Brian, I have a question.
Yes, give me 1 second here.
No worries.
Okay, so I just dropped that for anyone on the call who's doing the TD version. I just dropped that that essentially what we just did with Angel. That is in those first 2 sections of the feature testing lesson. All right, and Andrew, is that you with the question?
Yeah. So I ran through this yesterday and had got all this set up. But now I was looking at the seeds portion because I didn't look at that yesterday. And as I was like, I added some things in my seeds and it showed up. And then all of a sudden I was getting like all these weird little things here. Like that new line there, and I don't know where that's coming from. my artist index. And so I was like messing around with this. I have like a nested iteration here, which probably isn't the best, but I wanted to show all the artists and then all the artist songs with like a link to each artist song. But I keep getting this here and I can't figure out why that's there.
Yeah, so I think I see what's going on here. You're using, first of all, you're using a map here. And we typically don't want to do a map inside the views because we want our views to just be like really simple. So changing that to each, let's see how that works. Okay, so that still has an issue. Yeah. So what's going on here is because you've used the render version of the ERB tag right there with the equal sign on it, it will display, it will add into the HTML document whatever the return value of your code is. And the return value of each is the original array. So it's displaying that artist.songs array. Yeah, so that's the fix for it.
Oh, okay, cool. That was easier than I thought. Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Joseph, it looks like you might have a question.
Yeah, you know, I am getting held up with a gem error that I have experienced before, but the fix that I had before is not working this time. I'll share my screen here. So for some reason, this gem does not want to install. And I had this issue with Task Manager, and I've run where is it? Sorry. So this is the command that worked for me the first time with Task Manager that allowed me to even do the bundle install. And for some reason, it's just not working this time. I was wondering if you're familiar with this gem, why I might be receiving this error. I have no idea.
Yeah, I've seen this before, but I don't remember exactly what the issue is. Can you, I just want to see this from the start. Can you do a bundle?
Yeah. Bundle install or just bundle?
They are the same thing. So you can just do bundle.
Cool.
And now it's getting to that installing FFI. Okay, so can you copy that gem install FFI 1.3, all that? Do you see where that is?
Where is that?
It says make sure that gem installed. Yeah, so not quite the whole thing, but just where it says make sure that, and then that command. Yeah. So let's copy that whole thing, including the -- source, all that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll probably need to take out that leading backtick.
Of course, it's not going to let me do that. Sorry.
Control A.
Okay.
Did that not work? It was supposed to send your cursor.
There we go.
Yeah. All right. Cool. And it looks like you took off the trailing quote.
Oh, that end quote.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. So let's try that one more time, but add in that trailing quote. Yeah.
Why is it doing that? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Let's
sorry. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go.
There you go. Okay, so what do we got here? Do one error generated. Closure. Yeah, can you scroll up a little bit in that error? Error filter, error installing by. Can you open up the gemfile.lock? And can you search for FFI? Can you keep going? Is there another one in there? So there's that 1.13. Yeah. Let's try to delete this gem file.lock.
Just delete the file.
Yeah. And let's try to bundle again and see if that'll work.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if you go back to that gem file.lock and do that search for FFI again. Where's the next one? Yeah, so for whatever reason, the like version, I think there's something wrong with that version 1.13. And so yeah, probably the easiest thing to do would be for us to just like update that gem file.lock, but I think you should be good to go now.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome. Diana?
Yes, I am getting an error that I don't think anyone else, sorry, has been getting. I'll share my screen.
Did you say that everyone else has been getting?
Oh yeah, that no one else has been getting, I don't think.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, let's take a look.
Okay. It's for the references when trying to add, what is it? Add the artists to the songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right now, it says undefined local variable or method references. So this is telling me that that is a Ruby error. That's something that I recognize as a Ruby error. This Rails generate command is not something we run from Ruby. We run from the command line. So you need to exit out of this IRB session, and that should do it. Yeah.
It's been there since yesterday. That's why. Thank you.
You're welcome. Adam.
I was trying to run the RSpec stuff and I was having an issue where it's like giving me this error where it says require Rails helper, but it's in the artist spec file. And I think it's placed correctly. Can I show my screen?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Okay, do you see the terminal in the in Atom? Okay, this is the error that I'm getting.
Okay, so we get syntax error, unexpected end of input, expecting keyword end, Rails helper line 70. Okay, let's pop open Rails helper and let's scroll down to that line 70. And
maybe this is a problem with my copy and paste. There was two ends on the shoulda matchers, but I didn't think that second end would be necessary, so that's why I got rid of it.
I think probably what happened is you accidentally removed the end that goes with this do block. Do you see that? So I think just add another end right there on line 64. And then you've got two do blocks, so we need two ends. So we just take out one. And I think that should be good. And then that looks good. And then just to satisfy my own OCD, can you indent that back over one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oops, nope, that did not work.
And you don't need to do the whole thing, just the first line, because everything in this block is inside another block.
Right.
So yeah, that's what the indentation should look like. Yeah, I think you're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Doug.
I think mine is fairly simple. I went to download or pull clone down, and I got looks to be a fully complete version. So I'm not sure which branch I'm supposed to be cloning.
Gotcha. So you don't clone branches, you just clone the repo. So you should get the branches with the repo. So you should be able to do a get checkout, and the branch is handling requests, snake cased. all lowercase.
Oh,
with
okay.
underscore.
So I just need to check that out and work from there.
Yeah, you can't really like clone
Gotcha.
down into a branch. You have to clone down. You'll be in the default branch, and then you have to check out.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Jenny.
I'm having an error that I don't know how to fix, so I can share my screen.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Can you see my terminal?
Yeah,
Is it small? I don't know.
looks good. Okay, so uninitialized constant active support test case. I have never seen this before. Okay, let's figure it out. So can you run whatever command you ran to produce this? Is there a, yeah, okay, that looks good. So where is the, uninitialized constant active support test case? Yeah, and where is that pointing to? Spec helper line 102. Okay, so I think what you need to do is you need to move this shoulda matchers block into the Rails helper. I think that should do it.
Oh. Okay.
Put it down there and see if that works. Cannot load such a file, spec models artist spec.rb. Can we verify that we have that file?
What is it?
Spec models.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay.
That's a. We need the B, and then we'll be good. Hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Adam. Jake, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm embarrassingly stuck like at the very beginning still, where I cloned down from the GitHub repo and I did the create artists. Do you want me to share my screen and all that?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's going to be this one. So I got all this in here. Create artist looks good, but it's telling me when I do my Rails DB migrate that I'm having an error that setlist development does not exist.
Yeah, so let's go to, can we do a git status from the command line?
Yeah.
Changes not seen on branch main. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is check out the handling request branch. So this main branch has a lot more code than we need right now. So we'll do git checkout and then handling underscore requests.
That makes sense why like all of this was in artists.
Yeah. Okay, so it says you've got changes, so we'll stash them. Cool. And let's do a git status again to see what our working status is like. So we've got that DB migrate. Okay, that should be okay because that's what you're working on from this class. So
if I do migrate now, it should work hopefully.
I don't think so, but let's try it.
Okay.
Yep, you're doing all the right things.
This doesn't look. Yeah, still the same error.
Okay, so that's okay. Because you were the one navigating yesterday, you didn't create the database on your computer. So you're gonna have to run Rails DB create.
That makes sense. That makes a ton of sense. I can't.
And then after
migrate
that,
something
we'll try your
else.
migrate. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. That all makes a ton of sense. Did I miss something where it said to switch branches? Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right, I'll get back to it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Good. Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I just had a quick question about the references we add. We do that migration add artist to songs. Is that the only way to create that foreign key link between the parent and the child? Or it seems like in my project, I didn't even do that. And it's like still can have many of the parent or whatever, you know?
Did you generate it by just making it like an integer column?
I did, yeah. Like I manually made like a foreign key that links to the other table, you know? So
Yeah.
the tests are still passing in the project. I was just wondering if like this is something we would have to do.
I don't think you would have to do this, but this is the best practice to use the references syntax because it will do some additional things rather than just linking them together. It will also add some indexing into your database, which will just make your database more efficient. We're not really going to worry too much about indexing, so you don't have to like go back and change it. But in the future, use the references syntax.
Awesome. That's good to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's go to Jordan.
Hey, man. So I've had a couple problems that people had with getting into the correct branch, and now I'm at the spot where it's telling me the schema does not have an artist table, and so I ran the Rails G migration create artist name string, and then added the t.timestamps, and then it says after that open up the schema, and do you see the new artists? And I do not.
Cool. So let's go ahead and get you on the screen share.
Sounds good. I tried to drop and then create and then rerun this. I'm not sure, kind of all over the place. Pretty confused at this point.
Yeah, so when you run Rails G migration create artists, it says conflict with another migration called create artist. It says another migration is already named create artist. Do you see that?
Yeah, I did it right here, and then I wasn't sure if I needed to drop because I was driving yesterday and I deleted this and then pulled down yours so I could just have the same thing, and I wasn't sure if I needed to do like the drop, so I did that and created again and then try to run this again, but I had already done it up here, so I think that's why that's giving me that message there.
Yeah, so let's go look at that migration. Looks like it's the second one in there. That one looks good to me. So in order to, those are the instructions for building up our schema. So let's open up the schema file and let's run from the command line Rails DB migrate. And this is the command that should change our schema. So this might have been.
Oh, got it. Because before it tells you to run Rails DB migrate, it tells you should have this already in schema. So is that just?
Oh, it does. Where is that?
So there's like a step that's missing. So it's about a third of the way down, I guess. It's underneath where the the big code block class create artist, where you add the timestamps. Underneath it says, this migration looks good. Open up the schema.rb file again. Do you see new artist table? Take a look at the version, blah, blah.
Yeah, and so I think you're on the right track. So the answer to that question is no, we don't see it. And then it says it should match the latest version of our migration file, but it doesn't. So let me like draw on here. What it's saying is this version right here. So I see 2020 1202 220802. That is this migration right here, which is the first one. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to be updated to this place. So I think you're right on track, Jordan. The answer was no, I don't see it.
Okay.
And now
so
when
if I
we run
Rails DB migrate.
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool.
So we saw both the version change and us get our new artist table.
Sweet. And so the version, up here is good now.
Yeah, see how it matches the latest migration now, 182506.
Oh yeah, okay.
182056.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Andrew.
Sorry. Yeah, so I had a question regarding the seeds. When I put in like the Rails DB seeds or DB seed, and I have like the song destroy all, artist destroy all of that stuff saved in my seeds file. So that is going to completely erase and save what I have in my databases, and then whatever else I create in my seeds folder or file is going to populate with that. And when I run the Rails DB seed, it's going to save that. So even if I go back to my seeds file and I comment that stuff out or delete it, it won't go back to the way it was before. That's now like the base, my database.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I think you've got it. Yep.
Okay, cool. Because I had written like all the tests for this yesterday when we talked in the check-in. You said to kind of go forward and look at the testing. And then now I was doing the seeds and I went back to my tests and none of them passed because I've changed all the information inside my seeds file. So now my RSpec test won't pass because that stuff isn't there anymore. And I was just wondering if there was a way to go back to the way it was, which I'm figuring out now, just like kind of hard coding into my seeds, destroying everything again, and then putting it back in as like the I really like you and the call me maybe stuff. That way my test will pass. But I just wanted to know if like that was true when I run DB seeds, it's like gonna save that and that's now the database and you can't go back.
Yeah, that's essentially correct. Yeah, when you run that Rails DBC command, it's just going to execute whatever instructions you have written in there. So if we write instructions to destroy everything and then repopulate with something new, then yeah, that's going to be our new version of our database. Now, a key point here is that your development database, the seeds is seeding your development database. The tests are working off your test database. So the seeds should not mess up your tests at all. So if you're saying that your tests aren't passing, there's probably something else going on.
Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, I set up the songs like inside of my test, so like it should still work, but I was getting like that they all failed and it wasn't finding any of that information within the page.
Gotcha. So I think that that's probably a separate issue. Let's hold off on that for right now. And I want to do a quick check-in with everybody. Can I just get people's videos on as you come back? I think I said 11:30, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. So it looks like most people are back. Yeah, so I know that didn't go quite as smoothly for everybody, but that's okay. Like things happen. We learn about different things that maybe we weren't necessarily expecting. I would say like this lesson plan is very crucial and you need to work through this at some point. So if part of your work time becomes working through this lesson, that's going to be a good use of your time. So make sure that you work all the way through this lesson at some point. Let's do a check-in. Can I get a hand raise from everybody who was able to get all the way through the lesson plan, whichever one you were looking at? Cool. So maybe like half of the people. Can I get a thumbs up if you let me share. And I'm going to lower your hands. Can I get a hand raise if you were able to get through this active record associations, or if you worked on the TDD version, if you got to this point of adding belongs to and has many into your models? Gotcha. Okay, so it looks like not quite everybody got to this point. What I want to do is I want to give you all a little bit more time to work on this. So let's say I'll give you all 10 more minutes to try and get as far as you can. I would ideally like everybody to get into This is the TDD version. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. I would ideally like everybody to get into adding in the belongs to and the has many into your application. So I'm going to hang around here, and if you are stuck on anything, please just ask for help, and we'll try and move you on. So let's take 10 more minutes, and we'll come back at 11:45. I'm going to clear everybody's hands again. And let's go ahead, and if you have an issue, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll try and debug together. Kyle.
Hey, I'm getting an error in one of our spec tests, and I was just curious if you could help me troubleshoot it.
Let's do it.
And so I was able to get all of I added, I think, 2 of the other tests, both for validations and building a class method. But what I'm running into is the validations for has many songs.
Can you run those tests again?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's going on is we'll talk about this more in the model testing lesson, but the way this works is it's looking at whatever this top level describe thing is. That's the way the shoulda matchers work, and they run tests against whatever that thing is. So this validation is working because it's looking at this artist here. Because this describe block is outside of this one, that's why it's not working. So you just have to move that one describe block inside the other one.
So that's it.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If anyone else needs help troubleshooting, just raise your hand. Let me know. Jenny.
I'm getting an error on one of my specs, so I would love to see if you could help me with it.
Let's check it out.
So it's saying undefined method song count.
So it's saying undefined method song count. What is it saying undefined method for?
For class.
Yeah. So what that says is that you're trying to call this method on a class. And so in order to call a method on a class, we need a class method.
Okay, I'm still not following.
So in order to make this, so what this is saying is over here, we're calling this song count method on the song class itself, not as opposed to an instance of the song class.
Oh.
So the way you've defined the method is an instance method, which can only be called on an instance. So we just have to define it as a class method. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And you are going to run into another issue with this. So we get undefined local variable and method songs. Yeah, this one is. Yeah. Yeah, try that.
Or just. Awesome.
Yep. And then just some other quick things. .all, you don't need to call .all because as we talked about before, song, the class already represents the whole table of songs. So you could just say song.count.
Oh, nice.
Well, and then another refactor, because we're inside a because we're inside the song class, we don't, and we're inside a class method. Inside this method, we can refer to the song class as self. So let's change song to self here. So self kind of represents that song class within this class method. So there's another root
That
vector.
makes so much sense now. I used to look at self like not on the method and be like, what is this doing? So thank you for explaining.
Yeah, it's like whatever the method is. And then the final thing is that in Ruby, self dot is always implied. So you could actually just take that out completely and just have it be
And
count.
just do count.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was
cool
awesome
is
to
that?
watch.
That was so cool.
Yeah, we've got that on the recording, so I'm glad.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
You're welcome. Kyle, do you have something, or is that from before?
Oh, no, I don't have anything.
Well, yeah, if anyone else is running into any issues we can take a look at. Karen, what do you got?
Yeah, I just don't know why. I can't figure out why I'm getting, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I'm getting this error here, the syntax error. Songs average.
Interesting. Artist.rb line. Yeah, I think this syntax looks good. So because you're in an IRB session, I'm wondering if there was just like a previous version where your syntax was off. So what you can call inside this IRB session is reload with a bang to make sure that we've got the most recent code. And now let's try that. Let's try that again. Nope, we're still getting some weird thing. It says setlist app models RB artist.rb line 5. That's this line right here. Let's exit out of this IRB session. And is this, I'm just double checking that this path that I'm seeing is the same as the Atom path that we're looking at.
Okay.
Which it looks like it is. 2 module class exercises set list. Yeah, I don't know why that's happening. Let's try it again. Let's go into the Rails Rails C session.
Okay.
And let's try, yeah, I think your code for calling the method looked good. Artist.find by name prints. Can you do artist.all? Yeah, same thing. Is there something that I'm not seeing here? It's saying syntax error. Yeah, I don't, oh, is that file not saved? That's what it is. I see the little blue dot.
Oh.
And now let's call it reload.
Thank you. I have
Don't thank me yet. We need to make sure it works.
Okay.
Yeah, that's weird. If you have autosave on and that didn't work, I find that odd.
I know that it doesn't, like it decides not to work sometimes, but okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Sorry for that.
Welcome. No, no worries. No need to be sorry.
Not sorry.
Thank you. Doug.
So I think I have made a mistake earlier when I was on the main branch and I had way too much stuff going on. I created some databases, and so now it won't let me like create the correct databases anymore.
Let's check it out.
Basically, what I've got going on is if I look, I put that there. I've got all these, I think, too many databases going on. So when I'm trying to just create my artist database, based off of my generate, it won't let me. It's giving me saying it already exists. So I don't know how to undo, since I accidentally created my database off of everything instead of just the smaller sample.
Yeah, so what you did was you ran the migrations that were the completed version, and that was like too far forward. So this is never a situation we're going to run into real life where we're like, our app is like way far ahead and we're trying to go check out an old branch. Like, so this isn't a very realistic scenario. So the easiest way to kind of like start from scratch is to drop the database. So let's do a Rails DB drop. And then we'll kind of just go through the whole life cycle again. So we've dropped the database.
Just thinking about it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. So then in theory, if I go back to...
So hold on. Always make sure that you read your output.
Yeah, so it didn't... Another user using the database?
Yeah, so it's being accessed from somewhere else. That I believe is post to go. So I think you actually have to exit out of this. Or I think you could just like back up out of that database.
Okay, so then run it again.
Yeah, did you close post to go?
I did.
Yeah, so now, hopefully that was the thing that was accessing it. There we go, so now we can see drop database. So now, do you know what the next thing to do would be?
I would assume, since I have migrations here, I would just need to run a new migrate to get to where I am, or would I need to remove this schema first?
So let's try what you said. Let's do Rails DB migrate and see what happens. And while that's thinking, could you make your text a little bigger on your terminal? There we go. Okay, so now what are we seeing?
Aborted. Set list development does not exist.
Yeah. So your database doesn't exist because we dropped it.
Oh.
So before we migrate, we have to create it in order.
Oh, so when you drop it, it like totally deletes it. So then
we permanently destroyed that database. Now we should be able to migrate it. And we can see the schema file in the background. We should see that change completely.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So I think most people should be back by now. Let's just keep going with questions or anything that you all have that we can debug together. I think this is, I hear some people saying like, oh, I'm sorry that this is like, that this isn't quite working. Like us debugging together, I think is a great use of our time because things don't just go smoothly. Things don't just go perfectly. That's a muscle I want us to flex together. Jacob.
Yeah, I guess it was just a question about like when we seed something. So it looks like it's functionally identical, except the primary keys are always going to change when we seed. Is that correct? Does that mean we want to avoid seeding because it does that? Like, I mean, not do it too often?
Yeah, so the way, what the problem that Jacob is pointing out is, so like, let's say my seeds file creates 10 songs. What we know about the primary keys is that they're auto-sequenced, they're auto-generated. So those first 10 songs are gonna take IDs 1 through 10. But we never reuse old IDs. So if our seeds then, if we reseed and we destroy all those songs and create 10 new ones, it's not going to go back and give them the same 10 IDs. It's then going to start from the next sequence. So it's going to go 11 through 20. And if we did it again, it would go 21 through 30. So it would like keep using the next one. That's fine. We don't need to worry about that. And the reason why is because we should never be assuming any ID. We should never assume an ID that an object will get. We should always just let Rails take care of assigning the IDs the primary key IDs, and we don't really question that. So it's totally fine if it's assigning you different IDs. Yeah. Does that make sense, Jacob? Do you have any follow-up for that?
No, it makes perfect sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. Doug, I see you have your hand up. Was that from before?
Yeah, that's from before.
Gotcha. All right. So while there's no hands up, I'll go ahead and share my screen and just kind of like talk through this lesson plan a little bit. So again, if you didn't get through this, I will require that you work through this lesson plan on your own. These active record associations are very, very powerful tools that we will use throughout the mod, throughout mod 3, and throughout your career as a Rails developer. They're super important. So what this first part is for one-to-many relationships the hard way, this is using some active record commands that we, I don't think we've necessarily used them in class, but I think you all know what a where statement is from the database, or sorry, from the PG exercises from the pre-work. So a where statement here is going to find, and I guess we did talk about that in SQL. So it's going to find a record based on some condition. So if we want to find, if we have an artist object right here, and we want to find the songs associated with it, you can use a where to say, find all of my songs where my foreign key matches my primary key. So this is essentially earlier when I had Harrison like draw the arrows between the records in the database, this is the code that will do that for us. This will say match the foreign keys with the primary keys and find me all of those records. And then we could also go the other direction. We could say, if we have a song, we can say find the artist that matches that song's foreign key, like this. So you can do all this stuff manually in Active Record, but it's not really the Rails way of doing things. So the Rails way of doing things is we're going to add in these associations into our models. So this is why I've been having you all describe things with like belongs to and has many. It's because that is that's the verbiage that Rails is going to use for creating these relationships. What these methods do is it allows us to call, what this syntax does is this allows us to call a method on a song object called .artist, and similarly allows us to call a method .songs on an artist object. So this is some syntactic sugar that creates a method for us. Can anybody think of something from mod 1 that's very similar? Like what's some syntactic sugar that will create a method for us in a class? Will?
Like the attribute reader or accessor?
Yeah, this is just like an adder reader from mod 1. When you made, I guess I'll just, what's the easiest way for me to do it? I have an annotate option. That's probably the easiest way. So like in mod 1, if I had like like a class of dog, and inside this dog class, I have adder reader for name, something like this. What this does under the hood is it creates a method called name that will read that instance variable out for me. So this was some handy syntactic sugar for this. Same thing in Active Record. This, with our Rails models, this, let me stop annotating. This line of code and this line of code right here create helper methods called artist and songs. So when we get down to this part of the lesson, we can use those helper methods of print.songs to create associated songs. So I forget who asked this earlier, but the question came up, is there an easy like Rails way to have those things connected together? This is it. So rather than us having to create a song and say the song's artist ID is this, we create it through this association, and it will take care of matching up those foreign keys and primary keys for us. So this is how we can create things through the associations. Similarly, we can read associated records with that same method. So we can call prints.songs, and that will give us the relation of all of the songs. And then, of course, we can use the other association. We can use a song.artist to get the associated artist with the song. So these associations are really powerful, and we're going to continue to build on top of them. They're going to help us create many-to-many relationships. They're going to help us do complex active record calculations. So these are really, really important. I just want to be clear that we did not show you this version, the like relationships the hard way, so that you can use this. We showed you this so that you can understand what's going on under the hood and know that there is a better way using these associations. Looks like we've got a couple hands up. Let's go to Ben.
So I was wondering, when we have that, rain equals print songs create, that's living in a different table than those other two tables that have, let's say, artists and songs. Then you have like, or would that then just live under the songs table with the connected? And so if you had songs before you had like the foreign key connection, would you have to create a new migration after that?
No. So up to this point, we had already created the migration that related the two together with the foreign keys.
Okay, yeah.
So this does not create a new, you said it, this does not create a new table. This just creates a song on the song table, and it gives it a foreign key that matches Prince's primary key. Kyle?
So if you, because of the has many relationship with the songs, or I guess, no, sorry, with the belongs to relationship on the songs, where you have like beret or rain, if you were to just create those songs from not chaining it on to prints.songs, that would actually not save, and it would throw an error because of a requirement, right?
Correct. Yes. So this, and that's what this is getting into down here. So active record associations put some constraints or validations. So this is bolded here. This is a keyword. We'll get into validations more in depth. But it puts some validations on our models that says that now that a song belongs to an artist, you're correct, Kyle, a song cannot exist without an artist. So this line of code right here will produce an error because we're trying to create a song, but we don't in any way tell it which artist we're creating it for.
And why do we need a bang on the end of create?
Yeah, so that explains this right here. The bang will essentially throw an error if anything goes wrong, which is really helpful for debugging. I guess I'll just read this. The bang on the end of the create method tells ActiveRecord to throw an error if anything goes wrong, which is useful when developing or debugging. So putting something this like in a test or in the seeds file or something, or if you're doing from the Rails console, the bang is really helpful. If we didn't put the bang here, it wouldn't throw an error. So it would look like the song was created, but the song would not be a valid song that was saved to the database.
And is the long way of getting that error just doing errors.full messages on that object?
Exactly, yes. Angel.
Okay, so back to whenever you create, like when you do prints.songs.create, and it uses that reference to kind of add that foreign key, if that makes sense. I don't know if I worded that correctly. So Chris and I, we didn't add our reference. We instead added it to the table. So in our project, if we did, would this still work even though we don't have a reference?
I believe so, yes. And I think Chris asked that earlier. We said like, I created it without using the references syntax. Yeah, I think it should still work because it sounds like your foreign keys were working in general. So I don't think you need to worry about that.
Okay, cool, thanks.
All right, y'all. I think this is a good place to, well, it's noon, so let's wrap it up here. Thank you all for the questions. Please open up the survey for this class. Give me like 30 seconds, take 30 seconds or a minute to fill that out. If you want to sit with it for a little longer and submit it this afternoon, that's okay. But please take some time to give me a little feedback here. And I said it before, but this class is very, very important. And so I think I have everything that we've talked about recorded. If you were working solo, I had some good conversations around like debugging. We talked about class methods, a lot of things came up. So if you weren't able to pay attention to that, I would say like that's some valuable information for you all to go back and review. And of course, as always, if there's any follow-up questions from today's lesson, please post them in the channels and tag us, and we'll be sure to get back to you. And that's it. So once you open up that survey and take a minute to look at it, you are free to go. Thank you all very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
Hey.